Welcome to the special City Council special meeting, February 18th. Roll call.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Clapp.
Present.
Councilmember Lara.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith. Mayor Strobel.
Present. Members of the public wishing to address the council, if you would please fill out a speaker card, give it to our city clerk, limit your comments to 3 minutes, and maintain order and decorum during our meeting. Well, Mayor Pro Tem Smith's not here. I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, I notice we don't have a spot on our agenda for public comment, but is there anyone from the public wishing to make a comment or speak to something that's not on the agenda?
Dale?
Okay, so we'll move on to our work session. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. I've put together a proposed methodology for this session. I thought I'd go over it and make sure that it's what you want to do. So the steps would be we'll review and discuss progress on existing goals. Then we'll review and discuss proposed goals for the next 6 to 12 months. Then we'll hear public comment on the goals. And then we'll conduct a voting by dots exercise, which will help us get a preliminary set of priorities, but not a final set of priorities. And then we'll discuss the results of the exercise and actually set City Council priorities through that process. And that'll be it for this meeting. Then, based on your direction at this meeting, I'll come back with a work plan that describes in more detail how we'll actually accomplish the goals that you've selected.
Okay.
So if that sounds good, I would like to start with a little historical perspective on how we're managing the workload. One of the council's top priorities for the whole time I've been here has been to address infrastructure. And so we started with a very lean staff, and rather than building our staff back up, we've taken the growth in revenue that's occurred over these years and put it into infrastructure. So the result of that is that we have money to do some really important projects that have been high priorities for you. The other output of that, though, is that we still have a very lean staff, and we find with the lean staff that you can only take on a few projects at a time and be effective. So the question that kind of is before us tonight isn't what's a priority, because everything's a priority, but what's a priority to do first. One thing that we have done, though, is we've shifted staff around a little bit. So we've reduced staff in finance a little bit, and we've eliminated one department head position, but then we've created the community development director position and also put a little bit of staff in community development on a part-time basis. And that's also been an outgrowth of your priorities, and I think has been helpful in trying to achieve what we have achieved. So just as a review of what's been accomplished during the current fiscal year, the City Council adopted a dark sky ordinance. We spent a lot of time putting together the second unit compliance program and ombudsman program, and as you'll recall, we had a board to appoint the ombudsman. So there was a lot of work that went into that. We actually adopted the fifth cycle housing element. We adopted the environmentally sensitive packaging ordinance. We've come pretty far, we've come pretty far on the water-wise landscaping ordinance. It actually went to Planning Commission for one review and is scheduled for another review in a couple weeks. We also made a lot of progress on the height limit, including the solar access height limit, and that's still before the Planning Commission. We awarded the overlay project for our streets, which is $1 million capital improvement project. We completed the first phase of the museum repairs. We've completed the Sarzati Park building upgrades. The Libby Bowl fountain is partway completed right now, but under construction. And one that I left off the initial report but shouldn't have is that we created a building appeals board and appointed the membership and spent a lot of time helping them get started with their task. So I'm actually quite impressed with what we have been able to accomplish over this period of time with the limited staff that we have. There's a few things that we still have to complete on these projects. Even though we've adopted the dark sky ordinance, we still need to get out and, especially as far as the commercial lighting goes, develop guidelines for commercial, and educate the commercial businesses as to what the ordinance is all about, which will take some effort. In implementing the housing element, we have a number of ordinances to pass, and those have actually made it all the way through Planning Commission and should be coming to you next week. The environmentally sensitive packaging ordinance goes into effect on July 1, and we've been working on a brochure, and we're going to work on a program to take that brochure to businesses and actually pass it out and physically give it to them, because we found that when you mail stuff, it may not actually go to the right person, and we're not communicating as well as we should. And then we have another phase of work on the museum, which will probably be completed next year. So those are the goals we've been working on. During the course of the year, a number of potential priorities have been brought up by the City Council or have come out of what we've already done. And those are on page 4, and I'd like to briefly go through those. And everything I've listed here is something which probably takes up to 6 months and a reasonable amount of staff time, although some things take more than others. But anytime we change an ordinance, just by the nature of first and second readings and public notices and public hearings and outreach efforts and so forth, I'm finding it takes at least a minimum of 6 months to change an ordinance. So the first one is the public education effort on the dark sky ordinance. I think that's something that we'll be working on continuously through August. On the height limit, we not only, if the height limit is approved by the Planning Commission and then subsequently approved by the City Council, it still leaves a set of guidelines that we have to develop. And those guidelines could be very similar to the ones that Santa Barbara uses for their dark sky, or their height limit. But I've found that we have to modify it to take into consideration our own local values. So I think that the height limit still has quite a bit of work. The water-wise landscaping still requires Planning Commission approval and council approval, but it's pretty far along. The second unit policies, I think this is one of the biggest projects on the list as far as time and effort's concerned. Our Building Appeals Board and our Planning Commission got together and are working on a series of recommendations to the City Council to modify the second unit policies. Many of those changes require ordinance changes, and several of them also require development of guidelines. And so I think that that's something that we will be working on and will take quite a bit of resources. Neighborhood planning, the scope of neighborhood planning really is going to depend largely on whether or not we get a grant, a Sustainable Communities grant. But whether we do or we don't, we have to develop an RFP process, select a consultant to get that kick-started. And neighborhood planning will take a long time to do, but even the first phases of it, I think, are in excess of a year. And will take, even with a consultant on board, quite a bit of logistics on the part of city staff in order to set up outreach meetings, because it's a highly interactive process. Telecommunication facility ordinance, since we have a telecommunications special counsel and all his skills, this is a good time to be addressing that. Leaf blower policy, we've heard a variety of input from both council members and the public about either making it more rigid or making it more relaxed. The street sweeping policy probably would involve creating a pilot program, developing a signage program and a public outreach program in order to see what signage of an area does in order to improve street sweeping. The Visitors Bureau has expressed a lot of interest in making the process for transient rentals in residential zones cheaper and more accessible so that there's less illegal transient rentals and more compliance with some program that we would develop. And there are models in other communities, but I think this would take 6 months at least to put together. The mixed-use overlay for commercial, we actually do, this was something that was included in our housing element, and the idea is that a single parcel would have both residential uses and commercial uses, maybe not stacked, maybe back-to-back or whatever. And we actually have one property owner who's already expressed interest and is in the process of applying for a concept review on that. But that involves creating an overlay zone, which is an ordinance. The 2013 building code update is a potential project, and we've talked about the building code quite a bit. I think one of the things to consider on this is that this is the kind of thing that the Building Appeals Board would get involved in, and if you give high priority to the second unit policies, I think that's going to take a lot of their time, and that this it'd be hard for them to do both of those at once. Streetlights is the last one, and as we've indicated in our discussion, there's a couple problems with the streetlights. One is that the revenues are less than the expenditures, and the other is the dark sky, and how do we get our streetlights to be more dark sky compliant. And so there's a number of things to do there, looking at turning off the streetlights at midnight, looking at removing some streetlights potentially, or also potentially increasing fees. And so all of that would take quite a bit of time. So that's a summary. I'd be glad to answer any comments that you have on these, or we could open it up to the public and hear what issues they have.
Madam Mayor? I do have a couple of comments, and just to put in perspective what you just said, I just want to make sure that I understand what we're here to do. Most of these priorities have to do with staff, right? They're really council participation is very limited.
Well, I would say that the council participation is primarily policy direction at public hearings and so forth.
Okay, so just to start off, I appreciate all the input that you're offering about it could take 6 to 12 months. We don't know. I only got really 3 answers to 3 priorities about right now having some timeline what our staff could do, which is the number 1, we think it could be completed by August. Number 5, just to start off with, to do the RFP portion and do logistic with staff, it could take up to a year. Number 9, 6 to 12 months. And then our building code updates, you're unsure if we could really tackle that because of them doing. Yes.
I'm so sorry, Severo, but which one in 3 and 5 are you talking about?
Oh, the bullet points right here where it says potential goes on page 1-4 on attachment B.
You mentioned?
1, 5, 9, and
11?
9. What, 1, 5, 9, and 11, yes. So, I mean, as a council perspective, I guess I'm having a hard time, and hopefully my colleagues could chime in and see if they agree or disagree, is for some reason, I can't fully say what is a priority and what is not a priority, and I can't really distinguish which one will take more time than another, because I don't know exactly who's working on it or who department is actually in charge of it. I guess I want, I guess, more information on the bullet points, and these are just a priority for our staff, right? We have limited responsibility. Okay. And that's what, and I guess what I'm also want to address tonight as a council is looking more of the whole picture. of what our responsibilities are in terms of what's out there right now, and in terms of it could be environmental issues. To me, it seems like we only deal with certain projects, but we don't know where they fit in our whole goal, in our whole objective, our whole vision. So I'm hoping we could have a discussion about that. And there's a couple of other issues that I hope we could start talking about or generating. Is first of all is media and outreach. I've heard of, just to give an example, the Historical Preservation Commission wanted to use social media to do outreach to the public, and they developed their own Facebook. And I don't know where that lies, if they're able to do that, if they're not, but it seems like they want to go out there and do public outreach. The Parks and Recreation Department did it through the city. So I guess what I'm saying, there's a lack of attention to our overall goal as a community and as a council. And that's just one area. The second area is also environmental, with rhododendrocide. If it has to do with blower issues, how does that whole scheme fit into our whole goals? One particular issue that I've heard over and over in the community, and this is another issue, is the lack of transparency and why we're not able to answer questions about certain items, why staff do certain things. And I think it's been an ongoing pattern that I've experienced, and I'd like some input from my council members. So I guess I'm hoping as a council that we're able to tackle this. And I was just thinking, brainstorming and asking around the community, but I've been happy to entertain the idea about electing our mayor and going to a mayor election instead of a rotating council. So I would love to entertain that idea about directing our staff to do some more research, to do some more cost analysis, see the benefits. And I think that's a huge priority, because I think there's a lack of connection between us, staff, and the residents, our constituents. And I think as a council member, as a leader in this community, we really need to start addressing it. And it just seems like that it's an ongoing pattern. And I've asked many people, including clients, family members, just constituents, of what their ideas are, and they've all been for electing our mayor. Now, I also think that our mayor should have some power to do something if we choose to entertain that idea. But I think overall, this workshop, I really do appreciate the projects that we should be working on, but I feel a little tied because we're just focusing on projects and ordinances that have to do more with our staff, and we're not overall looking at whole goals as a council and not having a dialogue. So I guess I'm opening it up right now, and I hope and expect I get some feedback from my colleagues.
Yes.
Thank you. I think, you're mixing up two things. This is a goal-setting workshop. What you're talking about is philosophy, and what are the other word on this? Philosophical, there's the general plan, there's, what? The overall.
It's on.
It's on. Move it closer. You have a philosophical idea of the city. We have what type of city do we have? There's two main types there are. They're contractual cities, and what's the other one? Full service cities. There is so much involved in what you're talking about. The goal of tonight is goals. Goals are way down there. You're talking about the philosophy of city, the way it's made up. The average person out there, the average city who has an elected mayor, the mayor does what basically Rob does, okay? He's the city manager. So you can have anyone, you can have a local business and run to be mayor. He has a laundrette and he runs a dry cleaning business. He gets elected as mayor and he's now running the city. That's absurd. I'm sorry. No, I would never elect that. So when people say to you, oh yeah, we should have an elected mayor, what in the world are they talking about? Have you asked them what they're talking about? They don't understand the mayor does not run the city. We have a city manager type government. And in 4 years you change it, and now we have somebody who again has no experience as a city manager. They run a local small business and now they're the manager of the city? I can't even think of something more absurd. So when people say that to you, I don't know if they really have, I think it's worth having a philosophical workshop on and going into what type of city we are. Do we hire a city manager who has experience in this, or do we have an elected city manager who is called, quote, the mayor? Because some cities have it as both. So those are all interesting ideas, but they're not for tonight. So if we want to do that, if you think there's enough public interest, and frankly, I want to see the public interest in that, because this is huge, a huge, huge deal. So when you tell me people talk to you, I want to see them. I want to see what their ideas, what they now consider the type of city we have and how we run it. This is huge. Tonight's meeting is just for the, as you're right, small goals. But you're talking about a whole philosophical difference, and it's huge.
Madam Mayor, if I just may just chime in, I'm not going to debate here. I just want to make sure that I think this is a goal. Yeah, it could be more towards a philosophical, how we run a government. But these, to me, are more priorities. And if you look at the whole definition of what our goals are, I mean, these, to me, those do not fit in the overall general plan that we have as a city. It doesn't. I think that right now we're talking about priorities. But yes, if we need to have another discussion about this, I'm more than happy to. And if we want to generate a lot of signatures, I'm more than happy to too. And I'm sure they're more than happy to come and talk to us. So,
Madam Mayor, I think maybe goals might be, maybe we're using the wrong word there. Maybe it should be, what are the next jobs in line that we need to get done? Versus goals. Goals is maybe an overarching principle. And also the city manager form of government versus the elected form of government is the structure. It's like the corporation, and then beneath the corporation you have the directors, and then beneath the directors you have the employees, and the employees do the jobs. And so you're talking about how that corporation is structured when you talk about whether there's a mayor or whether there's a city manager. One of the things that I have learned in the 5 whatever years I've been here, and it's really hard to learn this stuff. You come in, you're right, Carol, you come in as a city council member, you have this idea when you're out observing what it's all about, and you think, oh, I'm going to run for city council, and you run for it, and you think, oh, blah, 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 I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and you think you really have an understanding. And it's been really humbling for me, because I've really learned a lot about government from the inside, and really what it takes, and how many years it takes to get good at it. And I don't even approach that. It takes, honestly, I think it takes decades to really get a true understanding of how the political body works. And when you speak of city managers, cities in the olden days were much more simple. I think there was a complexity that we don't have today. Today we have so many other things that come from the outside that impact our cities that we have to deal with. A city manager or whoever runs the city is going to have an understanding of federal law, state law, muni law. They're going to have an understanding of handling employees. They have to understand how to handle directors of departments. There is a tremendous amount of a body of knowledge that comes with the city manager. I used to think, well, you could just bring in a business person and they should be able to run the city. Well, I was an arrogant business person. I thought, what's the difference? And now I learned that just as a person that runs a business that is a dry cleaner, like Carol says, or an auto shop, or a hardware store, the hardware store owner can't just waltz in and run a dry cleaner. My brother was a contractor, and he thought, I'm going to run an auto shop, and I can make tons of money doing that. And he's a rather cocky fellow. He's a piece of work, as a matter of fact. But anyway, you know, the times were hard. There wasn't a lot of construction. He goes, business is business. I can go in there and I can do that. And he goes and he buys a car repair business out of business in 6 months because he didn't know diddly about running a car business. So that is something that I've really learned about this. This takes a tremendous amount of knowledge, and it isn't something that you can just walk off the street and do effectively necessarily. Maybe some incredible genius could do it, but you know, like Steve Jobs or somebody, but not me. And the other thing is, I forgot.
Did you, Councilmember Blast, did you have a comment? And then I
Yeah,
have
I
a
do.
comment.
Okay, and then we can open it up to the public, too. I'm not so sure the discussion as to our form of government is the right discussion to have tonight, because I think really what we're here for, Councilman Lara, is I think it should better be entitled tonight task priorities rather than goals. Not that I disagree with us being able to discuss anything in a public session. But I think really we're trying to, as a group, as a body, to direct staff into the priorities that we have for their tasks. So that if we believe that the building code update is not as important as the second dwelling unit, then we're gonna direct staff. We want you to spend your time and your efforts on the second dwelling unit before you spend your time on the 2013 building code updates. That's it, just tasks to say this is what we think is important, whether we thought putting lights at the skateboard park was more important than putting lights at a tennis court. We're just going to direct them and give them our direction from the standpoint of what tasks do we want you to be spending your available staff time on, and I think that's what's tonight. We really shouldn't take much time tonight, I don't think, talking about the form of government, but I can tell you that, and I certainly do not have an opinion on which is the better way to go. We happen to have a city manager form of government now in Ojai, but there's tons of cities that have a strong mayor form of government too, and they seem to work out just fine. And where do those mayors come from? They come from people that run hardware stores and farmers and teachers and everything else. So if the public was such, because of the transparency issues that every once in a while tend to bubble up in this community, felt that there should be a strong mayor, I don't think we'd be the ones to stand in their way, but I'm not so sure this is the body to say that's the direction we want to go in. I think the citizens would have to come to us with that idea, and then we would react to it, but we don't even have to react to it. I believe the citizens could formulate some sort of a ballot measure and vote on it if they wanted to. But I think tonight we're really looking at tasks and not goals. Does that help at all? I know we'd like to probably talk about goals. I mean, I would like to talk about goals, but I'm not sure this is a goal-setting workshop. I think it's a more prioritizing task workshop.
Okay. The question of whether or not the City of Ojai should have an elected mayor, I would like us to put that on a future agenda. But I'd also like to add, when we're saying an elected mayor, then that means that the citizens or the voters of Ojai have so stated by their vote. There are two ways it can get to a ballot. One, it can be a council initiative, and that's why I asked that it be put on a future agenda. If the majority of the council votes no, as far as it being a council initiative, then the citizens have the right to have their own initiative, to collect signatures, et cetera, and depending on the amount that would dictate what council has to do. I'm not going to go into all of that. So I think we need to address the question of elected mayor. I would like it placed on a future agenda, and I would like us to go back to our goals. Is that good?
Madam Mayor, I definitely understand, and I'm thinking a bit more broader, even though it is elect the mayor. I'm also thinking about our goals. Where does it fit in environmentally? Where do we fit in with just the overall goal? I feel we're doing these projects, but we really don't understand what the overall goal is for the city. For example, the roadmap to sustainability was brought up. We adopted it some time ago, but we never look at it. We never clarify it. We brought up rodenticides and we move on it, but we're just moving. We're reacting. I don't feel we're doing it at whole. The whole elected mayor thing came because of the lack of transparency and trust, and people think that we should be held accountable. Well, I happen to agree with that, so that was just one of my points tonight, and I do understand where all my fellow council members are coming from, and honestly, I think that there's some qualified person out there that if the public was to go that route is qualified to run a mayor. I'm not saying that it's an easy job or that anybody could potentially qualify. No, you need credibility. You need to set goals. You need to know how a government runs. I am also humbled by this opportunity that I've had so far being on this council. So I thought it was more of a workshop goal / priority kind of meeting. So I just would like to address the overall goal. I read the general plan, and a lot of that stuff that's in there is outdated. And I would like to tackle that. I would like to tackle our recreation element. I mean, there's so many other things that we need to talk about tonight that aren't the agenda, that I feel it's only some tasks, not really many. And I agree with Councilmember Blatz. It should be a short meeting if we're just focused on those tasks. But do we see an overall goal, overall priority? What are other departments doing? I mean, some could potentially overlap. So that's all I'm getting at tonight. And I hope that I'm glad that we're put the elected mayor, but I would also want to put just the overall goals. And I'm talked to people that give workshop to professional companies, and they're willing to do it for basically not much. I mean, we're talking qualified facilitators. So I mean, I'm willing to just talk about these tasks tonight, but I'm also gracious that you guys let me know what you guys thought and what the whole goal of this meeting was. So thank you.
Councilmember Clapp, did you want?
Yeah, I agree. It should be put on a future agenda, because then we can have a true understanding of what that would really mean, how the transition would be made, what the duties of the mayor would be, all of those things. I think would be really important to have that discussion. And I agree with you about the roadmap to sustainability and overarching goals about what we want to be as a community. And I can understand why you were confused about this. And I agree, we do need to have those other things addressed as well. And you're right that the general plan is really outdated, and that's a lot about money and staff. And so much of this stuff, unfortunately, like our Muni Code, which is severely out of date because a lot of it dates back to the 50s, same thing with that. And it's almost like we take on the ones that are the most critical at the time, because to take it all on is economically impossible for us because we're so darn small. We really are probably one of the smallest budgets of any city in the state. I don't think there's many other cities that have a small budget as us that I'm aware of. And the other thing is, I don't think, and I'm not necessarily saying that a mayor form wouldn't work. I'm not necessarily saying that there's not somebody out there that would be really good at doing it. That's always possible. But I also don't necessarily believe that that will give you transparency. Corruption, lack of transparency, hiding things under the desk or whatever, occurs in any form of government. So that's not a guarantee of lack of transparency. Corruption can occur anywhere. And there's also the potential with a mayor form of government that you can get a very strong good old boy network that occurs within a mayor form of government, like Mayor Daley in Chicago, or things of that sort. So I think that if you're going to go in that direction thinking that it's going to minimize corruption or help with transparency, I think that I'm not so sure that that's a guarantee.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
If I may. I absolutely appreciate, you're absolutely right. And I think that sooner we get it on the agenda and we're able to, and pinpoint the cons, the pros and cons, we could actually see actually what the process entails. I would like to put it up on our next agenda if possible, but that's desired with the mayor and anybody else. So, thank you.
Okay, when you say our next agenda, that would be February the 25th. The packet has already been delivered.
Or the following one, sorry.
Madam Mayor, for Council Member Lara's information, we did have it was either 1 day or 2 days. Was it 2 days?
2 days.
A 2-day session with a facilitator last year. The council was open to the public. And you went. So that was more of the broad goal. That's where we came up with the mission statement and things like that. But I tend to agree that sometimes we lose sight of the overall picture for these projects that we have to prioritize. And I don't think we should do that. I don't think we should lose sight of the big picture. So thank you. I think it's nice to have somebody that can look at this from a little bit different standpoint when you're talking about goals. So thank you for bringing that up.
Mr. Clark, did you have something you wanted to say?
So my intention in putting this exercise together is that you can add things to it. So, I mean, we could add visioning session, if you want to call it that, or visioning and goal setting session to that to vote on. And we could add social media to it to vote on. So if you'd like me to do, I'll put those up right now. And if there's others that you want to add, we can add those as well. Yeah.
The easel's back a little bit.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's better.
Mhm.
Can I scoot over?
Yeah.
And Mr. Clark, while you're up there, would you add roadmap to sustainability? We've had such a creature in existence for
terrific
many,
document.
many years, and we actually have made some progress on it. It's just that it doesn't appear before council very often. So maybe it should appear before council, so we
could,
know that
yeah.
we're active on it. And you mentioned transparency, and that that's a real hot button for me. And so when it's just used as a blanket statement, it's not fair to the council. I think that we, the council members, have endeavored to be transparent. If this is some kind of blanket statement of how the city overall works, it's not fair. So when you say transparency, and maybe that's something we should talk about in a visioning or goal session, I need some specifics, because it's real easy to say we need to be more transparent.
No, and I do appreciate that comment, because when I say us, city, I include myself. I'm not just mentioning anybody else. I'm including myself. And when it comes to transparency, the first word that comes up to that has been question of mine, and it's a hot button for me too. is a cell tower. Am I for it or am I against it? And having to blame it on the planning department, I don't think is fair either. And I take blame for it just as the planning department. So that's what I mean by people questioning our transparency and our accountability. It's a hot button for me too. I'm not saying that you or someone else, individual, is not being transparent. I'm including myself in that too. So that's what I mean. And the example of it is the cell tower. So.
But I'd like for you to stand alone on that,
Okay.
because I'm not including me. Now, I do have a comment since we've brought up the AT&T cell tower, and that is, where are we? We had an application that was deemed incomplete. 17 items were requested. We changed community development directors. The 17 items were appeared received. The application was deemed complete. That is all. It has never been approved.
Never.
There is no approved application for a cell tower. We have a process. When an application is complete, then it's sent to the, well, not always, but in this case, it's sent to the Planning Commission. We had an error in our noticing requirements. So the Planning Commission, when it went before the Planning Commission, it became a workshop. There has not been a public hearing on it. Transparency. I think what we're confusing is misconception with withholding information. Now, as far as any member of the council saying, I support, I oppose, that's improper. Because should it come before this body, if we have already taken a position, then we very well could be asked to recuse ourselves. So it's imperative that we not take a position, regardless of how much pressure we get from the public. And I see I'm really on my soapbox tonight, so I'm just
I would like to spin off on that a little bit.
Okay.
One thing is that I've learned about government is that I didn't know anything about government and local government. I really did learn that. And the transparency, a lot of the transparency is here. You just got to come through that door and you'll get the transparency. This is an incredibly transparent council, and we have put things in place to make it more so than it's ever been since the 20 years I've been here. We now have quarterly meetings with the commissioners. We have monthly meetings with Planning Commission. And you can always walk in the city clerk's door and ask for any document. You can always walk up to the planning desk and say, what is in planning stages? And they will show you. The government here is transparent, but the citizens need to come forward, walk through the door, and ask the questions. And I think that that's something, there's a citizen's responsibility with all this. And I think overall as a nation, we're angry. I think because we feel we have no power at the federal level, we have no power at the state level, and one of the only places in this country you can get any contact with your government directly is in a council meeting. And I think that's great, and I'm glad there's still that connection, but I think sometimes people bring their anger against the federal and the state government that they have built up inside of them, and I have it too, and bring it in this door too. And I don't think that this council is in the least bit trying to hide anything from anybody. And I'm convinced of that, as a matter of fact. And just as running a business, Severo, you know every day you go to work, and I call it, you're a fireman when you own a business. Inevitably, you have an idea what you're going to do when you walk in the door, and then something comes up and you got to handle it. Or you learn about some employee that's gone rogue on you. And they've sprayed through rodenticide and sprayed Roundup all over this customer who is livid because she told you, and she calls you and you say, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Jones. Well, you should have known. So, Garrett, get where I'm going with that?
No, I do understand that, Madam Mayor, and the fact that, I guess what I was going with the whole transparency is not saying that we're not or we are, but that's the vibe I got from the community. But that's okay. I understand that. But was the first time that I hear one of us actually clarify the steps that happen and it's clearly say there were 17 items that were returned to us and there was not a completed application. That's the first time I heard us speak of it out public.
It was a completed application. It's complete. It was not accepted by planning. It was not accepted by the city council. The application was complete, period. It doesn't mean it was accepted.
Yeah. So, but it was the first time, and I think Mayor Strobel explained it beautifully. I think she explained it just fine. And I guess that's what I was just saying. I'm not saying that I feel like we're pretty honest. We're pretty straightforward. But that's just another, and I know that's a whole other topic, but it's something that I feel that it's important to get out there to the public and connect. And that's why I feel like social media is an opportunity for us to start working on it and improving, because it's the same thing when I was in the Parks and Recreation Commission. We were so criticized for not being transparent, for not doing our job, for staff not doing our job. And we worked and worked. It didn't mean that we weren't, but at least we went out there and we started clarifying things. And the cell tower is a perfect example. I'm just using it. But that's where I'm coming from. I'm not, it's a hot button for me too when people say I'm dishonest or not saying the truth. So that's all I'm saying. And that's what I mean by when I use those remarks. It just needs a little bit of clarifying. So I really appreciate your comment. So.
And one real quick thing, and I'm fine. But I agree about the connection. And that's why I say what's so important is makes the connection work is it comes from both sides of the fence. The citizens have to walk in the door to help make the connection, walk up to you on the street. And yes, maybe we could do more social media, but we're here 2 nights a month. Walk in the door, come up to that podium, say whatever you want. I don't care. You can tell me there's Martians outside. I don't care. Tell me whatever you want.
We've had that.
That has happened.
There is responsibility from the electorate to make that connection just as much as it's our responsibility to make a connection with them.
And Madam Mayor, I am pleased we're showing some fight and some explanation, but thank you. And I know that we have a meeting tonight, so I don't want to hold on. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. It's one of those prerogatives I get in this. And earlier in the evening, first of all, there was an error on the agenda that stated the time incorrectly. Was that corrected?
Yes.
Okay. So for those of you who thought the meeting started at 7, it actually started at 6.
As it says it correct on here.
Right, and it was brought to Mr. Clark's attention
Thank you.
last
Pick
week.
that up.
So we've had, not last week, but we've had plenty of time to correct it. We have speakers in the audience now who were not here at the beginning of the meeting. What would the council pleasure be? Should we back up and ask for public comment, even if it's not specifically on the?
Yeah, that would be my pleasure.
My inclination is just to go through the stack, 3 minutes.
Can we do that, our lawyer? Okay, let's do that.
Okay, any further comments from the council?
Nope.
So
The
you
peanut
got us all
gallery.
excited here. There's a lot of energy going on up here. Okay. I'm going to go to the members of the public, and I'm just going to call you in the order I have them here. They may not be in the order you handed them in. Lorianne Sims?
Yes, Lorianne Sims, 1202 San Ramon Way. I came in late because I'm very sorry. I didn't know it was at 6 o'clock. It was at 7 o'clock, according to my schedule. I heard what you said. It's up to the public to come to you and ask you to do something for us. And I do not understand from all of the people that I have talked to here and elsewhere, and believe me, you don't know where else it's been that I've been talking. You need to just tell AT&T that you don't want a cell tower in a residential neighborhood anywhere in this valley. I don't understand why you can't do that. You're afraid of being sued? That is ridiculous. If AT&T sued everybody that said no to them, that's all they'd be doing, and that isn't true. And I firmly believe that if you tell AT&T no, they will look for a different site. And I don't understand why you can't just do that. Why do you have to just keep going around and around and around? You can't make a statement that says no, not in our residential neighborhoods. We don't want this. This is Ojai. This is a very special community. It's a very special community. And I know you've heard I've lived here for more than 50 years. Well, it is a special community, and you need to say no and put a stop to it. And I'd like an answer as to why you can't do that. You tell franchises no, you tell all sorts of people no. You tell us we can't do lights, now it's going to be water, it's trash bags, it's this, it's that. Why can't you just say no? This isn't the right place for this particular thing. Are you afraid to do that? I don't think you should be. Because we have a right to tell you that that's what we want you to do. And you represent us. We've elected all of you. And we are here asking you, pleading with you, to please just simply say no. And I bet you 10 to 1 that AT&T will say fine. And they will move to a different site or a different place. So please, you ask for our... I've been here now how many weeks in a row? You're getting sick of seeing my face. But none of you are doing anything transparently that I can see. Something came up, some letter that was signed with Eckhart or someone at AT&T, signed the day before we were here last Tuesday. And I was horrified because it was almost like, well, you all knew this was all going on. We didn't. You didn't share it with us. We need better communication. And you need to say no. You have a right to say no. I have a right to say no. You have a right to say no. So please, 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 no AT&T. Thank you.
Do we want to respond to the question of just say no? What?
I would like to explain why we can't just say no.
Go ahead.
Not me.
Oh.
I want you to explain why we can't just say no.
We can say no. Of course we can say no. But, of course, one of the fundamental principles of American government is due process. And we are obligated under the federal Constitution to provide all property owners and people seeking entitlements from the city due process. And due process is notice and opportunity to be heard. So if the city doesn't have the power, our zoning ordinance allows the church to lease their property to AT&T and to come to the city to seek a permit to build a cell tower. They are, under our processes, they're entitled to ask. They're entitled to due process, as are the property owners in the area are entitled to due process, an opportunity to information regarding the application to give their input regarding the pros and cons of that permit, and then we must follow through with due process. That requires a hearing before the Planning Commission and a hearing, and assuming and if appealed, a hearing before the City Council. And while the city is not, I'm not, as the city's attorney, afraid of litigation, I'm also extremely aware of the costs of litigation, and it is imprudent to act arbitrarily and capriciously in a fashion that could expose the taxpayers to significant costs and potential damages. So anytime you're involved in a matter like this affecting property rights, whether it's the neighbor's property rights or the church's property rights, we must do so prudently with substantial evidence and without giving an entire constitutional law seminar here. The decision of the City Council, the decision be made by the Planning Commission, and if appealed, the City Council must be based on substantial evidence on the record, and that's what we're in the process of doing, as rapidly as possible, as thoroughly as possible, develop the evidence to determine the appropriate answer to the question of whether they may or may not build the cell tower there.
And I have a quick comment. This is my short version of what our city attorney just said. Cell tower companies have a right to erect cell towers. The city has the right to govern the location based on findings that we can bring forward to support that, whether it be land use, view shed, artesian springs. We can't just say no and cease talking. We have to create findings. We have to create a basis for saying no. Anyone else want to comment on this,
I'll
or should
just
we
comment
move
on
on?
it briefly. What Mr. Fletcher was referring to with regard to due process involves you people as well. How would you like it if we didn't have any public hearings and we just approved the permit and it went up? Because believe me, hold on, because believe me, I've had people that have contacted me to tell me that's what they wanted. It's not fair to you. We are processing an application. We can't do any more than process the application. We just can't say no, because if that's all we did, as Mr. Fletcher said, make an arbitrary and capricious argument and say, no, we're just not going to allow it, guess what? They could sue us in court, and then the tower could go there.
They're not going to.
You have no idea whether they're going to. Okay, we will wait and see what happens at the Planning Commission. And then you can come back and talk to us.
So we have to wait till the end of May.
Hold it.
But we can't just say no. We can't.
I'm going to move on. Bill Miley?
Bill Miley, North Signal Street. I'd like to ask a procedural question, though. Since this is a workshop, why do we have to be limited to 3 minutes? Because there are multiple issues to talk about.
I couldn't hear a word you said.
This is public comment, it's not part of
He said
Oh, let me
because
say
this
that
is a
again.
workshop, he wants to know
Since
why
this
we're
is a
limited to
workshop-
3 minutes.
Oh,
I'm asking a procedural question.
oh, I see.
Why are we limited to 3 minutes when there are multiple subjects, and to get the public's input, including mine?
Bill,
Mr. Blatt,
Bill,
please answer that.
this is public comment.
Yeah,
This isn't part of the workshop.
yeah.
Well,
You're going to have as much time to talk about the issues in the
That's
workshop.
not what I saw.
Yeah, no, it's.
Timer came
This
on.
is public comment.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
If-
Oh.
If you have something to talk about other than what's on the
Oh,
workshop.
yeah, I do.
Okay.
One of the things I value very much is being informed about things that are happening which eventually or immediately will affect me and other people I know in my community. And I know that the cell tower application, I believe I know this, that I'm correct, that it was 7 months ago that Mr. Mullane received the application. And I believe that when such important things, when applications like that are presented to the city, the public should know that the application has been received and is being processed. Day one. And I would like to see that discussed in a future meeting soon, that we set up a chronology of all of the processes that are being done in the city, showing time and date and department, where it is, where it's going, and what the time limits are for completing it. So we don't end up having to find out that something's been going on for months that now has a deadline that is coming up fast. So please consider a chronology and let us know when things are presented, not when there are problems. Thank you.
So, Mr. Clark, would you like to briefly respond to that, or I can?
Well, I'm not sure I have a real sharp comment off the top of my head, but clearly one of the problems that we had is that this particular application and some applications in the past have caught people by surprise. That's not good for either us or them or the applicant. So I think it's something that we do need to address.
And I'm slowly gonna make my comments shorter, but I'm gonna say this. As far as making the public aware when we receive an application from day one, I don't see how it's possible. I don't see how it's possible, but maybe we can address that at some, maybe in our visioning.
Well, I think it's a worthy discussion to have, but just like some of the earlier discussions tonight, I think it's better to have a discussion with well thought out information. So my suggestion would be that we do have a discussion about that at some point in time. But I think just sitting here and speculating and talking without any thought or background probably isn't productive.
Okay, so let's include that in our vision goal. Vision goal session. So now we have, in our visioning goal session, we have the transparency, our application process and public awareness.
So you want to include it in this line?
Okay. I am lost on this one. Bruce kind of, thank you. And if you're here to speak specifically on the goals, let me know that and I'll pull your card then. But if you have something that's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now's the time.
right, it's first of all, the cell tower issue. It's very stressful for you as a consul. This is nothing new. This is happening in small cities all over America, and consuls are dealing with it. So I understand it's very stressful for you. But believe me, it's stressful for us, as I guess you have heard. Why is it stressful for us? For many reasons. But when I looked at the original planning document, I read it very carefully, and it said there was no impact. It said substantially no noise impact, so I called the person that prepared it, and I said, how do you know that? He says, well, that's a good question. We won't really know, will we? He agreed. He said, we are not sure. Then it said it has no substantial impact on the community around it. It's checked off. That's what it says. It has no substantial, but obviously it had a tremendous substantial impact. So it is stressful, and we just want to move ahead. But other cities have, I think Boulder has dealt with this. Ashland, Oregon has dealt with this. Many communities have dealt with this and been successfully put them in neighborhoods that are not right around homes. Thank you.
Jeff Lobel? And you may be coming up sooner than you thought you would. That's because I'm just the cards are going on top. We'll get through them.
Good evening. I would like to ask that you add to the goals a rebuilding of trust with the citizens of Ojai. I think that this whole process, and obviously I'm speaking about the recent planning department's choices, indicates a real lack of trust in the city staff and by some in the city council. When you hear things from city staff that filter out, that are blatantly untrue, when public records requests aren't responded to, when notices are given past the last minute, when press releases come out with dates on them that clearly were well before the council meeting, each of these things makes us wonder if we actually matter to the council. And I hope that there's some thought about how, I guess, transparency you mentioned, but really rebuilding of trust, because I think that that is the heart of the ire that you get, that you're hearing from the citizens. Thank you.
I don't think we need to add trust because I think that comes under transparency. Michael Shanahan?
Good evening. My name is Michael Shanahan. I'm at 120 Golden West Avenue. I come before you to actually bring up two topics. But first of all, and I arrived late, and I apologize if this is redundant, but I understand that we're in an extended period now with AT&T and that they've agreed to extend their application. But I've yet to really hear an articulation of what we're doing during this time frame. Are we assisting them to complete their application, which seems to me to be inappropriate? Are we letting it hang out there? Because there are some very specific questions that we have, and I have not seen that those questions have been directed to AT&T. So I really have a question as to what's happening during this extension and why it is that the city cannot simply move forward, reject the application as it was submitted. There's no reason to give AT&T more time. It's not like they've never done this before. So I think they're well practiced in this process. I don't think they need us to prop them up with an extension or assistance in their application. It seems to me the most appropriate thing is to bring it before whatever appropriate body and reject it as soon as possible. Secondly, I think trust is a separate issue from transparency. A trust actually begins with a willingness to change, and with all due respect, that's not evidenced by an immediate denial of a citizen's concern. That speaks to me more of a failure of imagination than a failure of process. I think transparency is easily done. And when we get to the goal part, there's an easy fix that every city process needs to have a step where it's demonstrated to you that the citizens have been actively sought, not just allowed to come speak to you. A passive allowing of citizens to speak to you, even for 2 minutes, is not transparency. This body, this city, should solicit and aggressively seek citizen input, and you should make staff prove to you every time they submit a recommendation to you that they have done so. Thank you.
William Ulrich?
William Ulrich, 487 Gridley Road. We meet again. I take exception to comments of Mr. Fletcher, by the way. The use of terms of art, legal terms of art, has a tendency of intimidating people. Arbitrary and capricious, it is not arbitrary and capricious for a duly empowered department director to deny an application, whether it's incomplete or the background, the policy of the city is against it. That's substantial. It's done all the time. It's done in Ventura County every day. So, to move beyond the sleight of hand, the legal sleight of hand, I'll address a couple of other issues. Planning Commission was created in 1980 by the city, Ordinance 10-1.01, which provides for 3 non-resident members. It was amended in 2005. I don't know if any of your members were here at that particular point. Even though this is an option, our present city council, that's you, in its wisdom continues this practice, that is appointing non-resident commissioners. Now, I'm bringing this up because it affects the processing of the cell tower, as it does many other issues. These commission members cannot vote in a city election. They cannot vote in the city. I would ask the council and the citizens of Ojai how they would feel about foreign nationals sitting on their planning commission. They also could not vote. Like all non-citizens, they could not vote in city of Ojai elections. Non-residents should not be able to hold office on commissions, on city commissions, which is why is this maintained by this council and not changed? Not revoked, not revised. Councilperson Smith, may be seen as prudent going forward if you, after you leave your duties here at a council meeting, where so many voters as they are tonight, have shared their feelings and concerns, you chose a less public forum than Rainbow Bridge to voice your description of these self-same citizens as whiners. You were overheard by several people, and that's kind of gotten out. Now, may have been taken out
Sir,
of context.
if you mind sticking to what your, not profiles or personalities, this is extremely, what shall I say?
Conduct
inappropriate.
of city council
And it
members,
makes
excuse
you
me, it's
inappropriate.
absolutely appropriate. Okay, excuse me,
Cease.
absolutely appropriate.
Cease the attack.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll move on. I have forwarded several emails to the attention of council members and Ms. Strobel and Mr. Clark specifically. I have not been favored with the courtesy of a reply to my most recent correspondence. It is now over 4 days. While I understand that you are all very busy, apparently ensuring that we have a cell tower installed adjacent to a nursery school, as a consequence of the implications of, once again, the use of arbitrary and capricious terms of art.
Thank you. Finish up.
Excuse me, I'm, okay. I shall henceforth forward my concerns. I hope you like paper via U.S. mail. Thank you.
Michael Francis Smith.
Michael Francis Smith, and I'm a new resident here. I've been here for about 3 months. As such, I haven't really formed opinions about my city council members, except City Council Member Laura, I want to thank you very much for bringing up the issues that you brought up today. I think as such, you gave the council sort of a temperature reading as to what the populace is feeling. There's a lot of anger. And I was angry last week, and I want to apologize for being as angry as I was. We actually would like to work with you. It appears that we haven't been told the truth. It appears from this side of the fence that things have been going on in closed session that affect our lives. So I want to make it clear that the neighbors are not saying that we don't want a cell tower in Ojai. Clearly, we have to keep up with technology. But the study that was used was clearly flawed. Are you aware of the cozy relationship that Rincon has with AT&T? I ask you to specifically ask Rincon to divulge publicly what the extent and the content of their relationship with AT&T. That study was flawed. In many, many different ways it was flawed. The review period was botched, and still there's no transparency. So very specifically, you're asking for specifics. We want to know, as Mr. Shanahan said, what is happening in this period of time, in this period of extension. We as citizens have a right to know about the process and the dates, especially in light of the fact that they were messed up. Why is it suddenly okay that Ojai, for AT&T to cut down old growth trees? Ojai is a city that makes roads around trees. It's confusing. Why is it that AT&T gets a waiver? This really comes down to the question of whose city is Ojai. Are we going to cave because we're concerned about the threat of some legal action by a mega corporation? It's not in the character of Ojai. It's not why I moved here. So I know that there's a lot of contention, and I'm feeling anger right now. I know you're feeling attacked. This is very sad. We really want to work with you. We're really offended that this has happened, and we would like to put this to bed as soon as possible. We really don't want to be contentious. We simply have a right to talk about what goes up overhead. Do you really want all of Ojai residents to have to wear tinfoil hats?
Nicholas Otway.
Good evening, council members. I feel like my comments may be a little bit out of order, but in any case, the words vision and goal and philosophy and city responsibility have been thrown around earlier this evening. So I'm just going to say a quick word. I believe you've heard enough about the cell phone towers. We might, though, if we needed some real data study some of the experiences of communities in other parts of the world in relation to cell phone towers and the actual documented health effects of these RF waves that we surround ourselves with. So, enough of that. I am, as an architect and town planner, in 1972, I stood in the Nordhoff High School gym talking against the scenic highway that the state highway system wanted to build up Lion Canyon, connecting Carpinteria to Santa Paula. And fortunately, I was one of about 250 people who talked it down, and it got killed. In fact, it even got erased from the state maps. I think that I'm only bringing that up because I wonder how many cars it took to get us here tonight. And I'm urging you, as you go to your individual jobs, your individual projects, that you keep in mind a vision that I would be glad to engage you at a later time and often as it takes to consult your mission, consult your vision, and see how this community might become something that was beyond the box that we've got ourselves in. Thanks to Henry Ford and others, we're really involved in a 100-year cycle of everybody over the age of 16 having only one way to go anywhere. It's turned most of our cities into parking lots. Downtown LA is only just now getting it, after in 1960, over a third of downtown LA was a parking lot with only the sky above it. And we have, in a very tiny way, the same issue to solve. And I am really happy to bring attention to the mixed use overlay and would love to see you think about your town as a place where people could live over the corner grocery store.
Finish up,
Thank
please.
you.
Okay, I have 3 cards that are, say it's about the goals. I want to make sure that William Wyrick, no, don't come up yet, but you want to speak on the goals?
I think if you don't mind, since you're trying to be specific, my comments are more overall, so maybe I should go now.
Okay.
Bill Wyrick, 607 North Branch. I wanted to speak to the council focusing on the mechanics of staff better implementing your policy goals and staff better being accountable to the council on that implementation. I think we've all come to the conclusion that could be improved. And I want to give 3 specific examples of the kind of mechanics that perhaps council could focus on and direct staff to think about. One is, I think we made some nice, some interesting moves, positive moves about how we vet and confirm members of boards and commissions. But my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no process by which council confirms department heads. I could be wrong.
I'll answer that. We have no responsibility for hiring or firing any staff except our city manager.
And that's what I thought. And that's what I thought.
All right, hold it.
And our city attorney.
And all I'm saying is that there might be some thought given to improving the coordination of staff with council through the city manager for department heads to be confirmed. This happens in many, many forms of government where important staff positions are vetted and confirmed, nominated by city manager, and then vetted and confirmed by council, just so that everyone has a communication about philosophy and implementation. It's not something unusual, and I'm just throwing it out there as something to possibly think about as being an improvement. Second point, I think we have an issue where there doesn't seem to be any clear guidelines as to issuance of director's exemptions in the Community Development Department. When should a director's exemption be issued? When should it perhaps be vetted just by the chair of the Planning Commission? Because remember what a director's exemption is. It's an exemption from public process. And I think there maybe needs to be some thought about guidelines for those director's exemptions. Third point, the use of consultants. To me, consultants should be implementing policy, not suggesting or making policy. And I've seen instances where it seems like consultant report is being offered as a policy recommendation, and I think that policy recommendations should come from staff, and they should be making the case for why something should be implemented. And I think that the distinction and procedures for making sure consultants maintain that distinction, if the council thinks it's appropriate, be maintained between being a resource for implementation of policy and for recommending policy and developing it. Thank you.
Okay, now I have, specific to goals, I have Bill Miley and Michael Shanahan. So if you're specific for the goals, don't get up yet.
Madam Mayor, this is a workshop, and have you taken all the public input from the first part of the meeting
No.
yet? Okay, then go ahead.
Sandy White?
Hi, I attended the first meeting that was here, and I've written a letter, and I've been asking via email for notifications about upcoming meetings. I'm late tonight because I had no idea this meeting was taking place. So perhaps you said in the beginning that there's a certain thing you're to be discussing this evening, but I wouldn't know that because I wasn't here. So I don't really appreciate being left in the dark. I think that point has been made by others, but I'd like to reiterate that. I'm also unclear of your process. I don't know where the city stands on this. I get bits and pieces of information, but I hear more about what's happening with AT&T and with the church than I hear about what is happening for the for the community members, which I am one. And I don't know where you're at, so I'm very unclear as to your process. And I'd like to know specifically what your agenda is moving forward and where you are at currently in this process and what your thoughts are about this tower being erected. I deserve the information and I need to have it from you. So I'd like you to create a process, create an agenda, do whatever, and let those of us who spend our time, effort coming to know what's going on. That lack of communication is, on our part, not clear, and I think you need to do a better job at it. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
All right.
would you mind explaining to her where she can find when the meetings are, where they're posted? Or do we want to?
Okay. All of our meetings are agendized. The agendas are posted in the windows here at City Hall. They're posted on the city website.
They're at the library, the books.
Well, I'm not
Library?
sure if they're still at the library.
Rhonda, where do they get posted? Where do we tell people when and where the meetings are?
They're on the website. They're posted in both doors here at City Hall. They're at the library. This meeting was posted in the newspaper with the correct time. We did post a new agenda with the correct time. I emailed out to an agenda distribution list.
So I was sharing emails with, I believe her name is Sherry, and she told me, as well as someone from Rincon, they would let me know the next meeting date, and yet I heard nothing from them.
Go ahead and have a seat, and I'm going to see if I can clear something up here. Go ahead and have a seat. Tonight's meeting is a special meeting. It isn't one of the regularly scheduled city council meetings. City council meets regularly the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. This is a special meeting. The reason we're having a special meeting is because the council has a policy not to take up a new issue after 10:30 at night. That's because by then we're getting tired. We're not thinking as clearly as you need us to be thinking. We were unable to complete the agenda from the last meeting. And so we continued this item. That's why we're having a special meeting tonight. This particular item is city council goals. That's the only item on here. And that's because we were not able to complete it at the last meeting where it was agendized. That's all this meeting is to complete what we started at the last regular meeting.
She was talking to Sheriff.
Madam Mayor, if I may add, I think the speaker's question about being notified for agenda items, that's agenda items related to the cell tower CUP application. We do keep a notice list of folks seeking to be sent a notice, an agenda of planning commission and city council meetings when the cell tower application will be considered. I'm sure we're going to make sure that list gets. That's to the community development department.
I'd like to continue here. The other thing that I'd like to mention is tomorrow night, Wednesday. There is a joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning Commission at 6 o'clock. It is not, the cell tower is not an agendized item. But you're more than welcome to come back and we can do this all again. And I don't recall exactly what's on the agenda for tomorrow night. I think it's, oh yes I do. Subdivision discussion. It has nothing to do with the AT&T tower. And I said this in the beginning of the meeting. I'm going to say it again because we have many people here now that were not here earlier. The cell tower application has not been approved by anyone. It has not. AT&T submitted an application. The planning director requested more information. We changed planning directors. That additional information was received. The item was placed on Planning Commission agenda. We didn't give proper notice of a public hearing, so we converted that meeting to a workshop. All that has been accomplished is that we have an application. That is all. Nothing has been approved. And I'm getting sidetracked again. Where was I? Okay.
Keep going with the green cards.
Okay. Inez, and I'm having trouble with your last name.
Canvasser.
Canvasser, okay.
You must be related to the other canvas.
Yes.
I am. I'm Inez Canvasser, and I live on 1119 Paseo del Robles. And I was late. I thought the meeting was at 7. I'm sorry. So you may have discussed it. But my question is...
Could you lower the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
Whenever we submit an application for any situation, if it's not completed, you know, you will say, oh, please, you didn't fill this part in. Please go home and complete it. So my question is... when AT&T submitted this application, they did not allow for other alternative sites in that application. So I'm just wondering, you know, why it would have been just said, it's not complete, you know, it's not a completed application. Could you take it home and provide alternative sites? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you.
And also, when will we find out about your thoughts and what's happening so far?
Okay, and I addressed this earlier. Go ahead and have a seat.
Thank you.
And I addressed this earlier also. I'm going to say it again. If we do our jobs properly, you will not hear a council member say, I am in support, I am opposed. Because should it come before this council, we must be objective. We cannot have already made a decision. In the process, the application will go to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. regardless of whether they approve or deny, it's probably going to come before this council. Because if they approve, our citizens are going to appeal. If they deny, AT&T is going to appeal. So it's going to come before this board. And it's my desire to keep this board as objective as I can until it comes time for us to make a decision based on what's before us. Did I get sidetracked or did I?
No, you're right.
Okay.
You did good.
So I hope that answered your question. Because hopefully, if we're doing our job right, you will not hear us say, we support or oppose, until it's before us. Councilmember Blatz?
I want to just comment on that a little bit more. Where this is going to be heard is at the Planning Commission. We don't direct anything towards what the Planning Commission does. It's improper for us to do it. It's going to go before the Planning Commission, it's going to have a full public hearing, and then the Planning Commission is going to vote on it. Now, if the Planning Commission denies the application, which they have the right to do, and as Ms. Sims indicates, AT&T will go away, we're never even going to hear the application. It's never going to come before us. No matter what we do or say, it's not going to make any difference because it's never going to come before us. But if the application is denied by the Planning Commission and AT&T doesn't go away, then it comes to us with a brand-new hearing. It's a hearing de novo, which means they bring all the points before us. And there'll be another public hearing, and then we get to vote on whether we want it or not. But we certainly can't prejudge what we're going to do and have any legitimacy of our decision holding up in court. Because if we deny it, AT&T can appeal it to the federal court. We're doing our best to, I think, solve a situation which caught us off guard. Because quite frankly, I, as a council member, was unaware that the application was moving forward to a public hearing before the Planning Commission. Generally, we hear about these things prior to that. The citizens I'm upset about because you guys weren't given the opportunity to know what was going on before you got a defaulting notice. So you thought all kinds of decisions were about to be made without any input from you. And that's the last thing in the world that we want. But right now, the application is in process. We have hired legal counsel to advise us on the proper handling of the application, but it's going to go before the Planning Commission. So we can take public comment for 3 or 4 hours here tonight. It's going to have absolutely, unless a planning commissioner happens to be watching it tonight, and he's persuaded or she's persuaded by what you say tonight that you may not have, that you might not be available to make in front of the Planning Commission. What you tell us tonight has absolutely no bearing on what's going to happen at the Planning Commission. We can't make it go there any faster. We're making it go to the Planning Commission as fast as we believe is legally prudent. We're not the ones going to be making the first decision. It's going to be the planning commissioners. So you're bringing it to our attention. We're fully aware of the situation. We can appreciate your frustration. But we may never even have an opportunity to vote up or down on this if AT&T is denied and it goes away. So bear with us while we're trying to get through this. But the impression that I'm getting is that people are coming before us expecting us to do something. The only thing we can do is get it to the Planning Commission as fast as we can. And that's what we're doing. We can't do a damn thing until the Planning Commission acts on it. And then depending on what the Planning Commission decides, it may come to us on an appeal. Then we can act on it. But until then, we can't do anything about it. There's absolutely nothing we can do legally to act on that particular application. And we owe as much to our citizens that are in favor of the cell tower as we do to the citizens that are opposed to it. And we owe just as much to an applicant, whether our persuasion was to allow a cell tower or not to allow a cell tower. We don't stifle somebody from not submitting an application. They have the right to go before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has the authority and the obligation to vote up or down on it. And then depending on what they want to do, it may come before us. But I want you to know that there's really nothing at this point, other than getting it to the Planning Commission as soon as we possibly can, that this body can do right now. We cannot summarily deny an application. There's no application before us. It goes to the Planning Commission. They can then approve it or deny it, and then it may get here. So I feel as though there's a frustration by the citizenry that we're not doing something about what we have an obligation to do for you. Our obligation is to get it to the Planning Commission as fast as possible and to demonstrate the impartiality of the City Council so that we have no problem if and when it comes to us that we can listen to the facts and vote on it appropriately and not be overly scrutinized when it goes to the courts, if that's what it does. I have another comment to make. About 3 months ago, in regard to Mr. Ulrich's thing about the planning commissions, I asked for an agenda item to be put on the agenda stating that we should only have citizens of our community on the planning commission. Except for Mr. Miley and Dale Hansen, there's not one person in this room was at the public hearing we had on that to discuss it. It was then the decision of the council to leave it as it was because we have some very good commissioners that serve tirelessly for free on our commissions. But at the time this came up before this body, none of you were there to talk about it. Mr. Ulrich wasn't there. We listen to citizens when they bring these things to us. And I'm the one that has to have it put on the agenda for it to only be Ojai citizens. But I was persuaded differently by my colleagues. I can assure you we're also looking into the issue of consultants, Mr. Wyrick. Sorry to interrupt.
I enjoyed listening to you.
Thanks.
Pete LaFollette?
Thank you, Mayor. Pete LaFollette, 999 East Ojai Avenue. Regarding the public hearing and the Planning Commission that Mr. Blatz outlined, as you heard earlier, the citizens here prefer to take a non-adversarial approach, and really all parties concerned, since this issue is really sort of turning into really bad, a bad PR disaster. I think the most prudent approach would be to emphasize the positive in the community, eliminate the negative. The tower itself is an overshadowing negative that you're hearing a chorus of voices tell you again and again and again. I have an observation, and it's not a complaint. The process surrounding this cell phone tower has shown a reckless disregard towards a process itself. It would be most unfortunate for all parties concerned, but especially to the citizens of Ojai that value quality of life decisions. If this cell tower were what we would call a point of no return regarding vital public interest projects, after this, it could get much worse, and it would certainly cause much more friction than I think anybody would like to see in this community. Thanks.
Okay, that's all the cards I have for unscheduled items. So we're going to move back, because we had gone into our council goals. We're going to move back into the council goals.
Mr. Clark, or Madam Mayor, I have one other goal that I'd like to add, and that is, I think it's hard for me to read that. You had it listed under the telecommunications facility ordinance, and that is where, for future applications, we need to review and update the telecommunications facility ordinance by perhaps earmarking within our community areas in which we would not find a cell tower objectionable, so that if somebody were to come in here, we perhaps could give them an opportunity to hear the alternate sites so we don't have this mess again.
That's what this is all about.
Okay. And I think that that's really important. I also think, though, that it's probably equally as important for us to work with the county because the city is so small at 4.5 square miles that most of the sites in the valley are probably outside the city limits, of which we have very little control over. So if we could somehow get together with the county and as a group look at these alternate sites, particularly if it's going to be in the East End, I think that would be very beneficial because even if we were to propose alternate sites to any applicant, if we propose one outside the county, we have no control over it after that is proposed.
Yeah, so we'll add that to that task.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
And also, I'd like to discuss lowering the height limit. I think the county's 40 feet or 45 feet. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons it landed in the city limits is because ours was 65. So we need to reduce it.
Actually, I don't think we have a limit.
Or there's no, woo, that's even worse. So.
So yeah, this task would include all of those things?
And you stated earlier, because we have the attorney right now that is an expert in this whole arena, this will be high on our agenda, on our goals as far as the time frame, right?
Well, that's up to you.
Yeah. So are we gonna? So at one point, right? So at some point we'll put these in an order, a number order.
We're gonna ask you to vote, but we're not gonna.
Oh, that's the dot thing, right? Okay, gotcha.
And I think I was probably in error just a moment ago. I think we probably do have a height limit, and it's 65.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought, 65. So we need to lower it to the same or lower than the county.
So I put guidelines because it could be more than height. You know, it could be distance from residences, all sorts of things.
Madam Mayor? I just have a question for staff in regards to solar access height limit. Is that the reason why it's not on there? Is that because we're dealing with it so soon, or are we going to? And also the rodenticide.
So I put.
Oh, the building height. I didn't see that. Okay.
So that includes solar height.
Okay.
And then the rodenticide is on your next agenda.
Next agenda. Okay, so it's not. Just want to make sure that we are aware of everything that's going on soon.
Madam Mayor, we have this list of potentially 13 different tasks that we're asking staff to look at. And it seems as though if we have to vote on all 13, it's going to be, I guess we could do it, but it's going to be a little difficult. We're going to be diluting our votes all around. It seems like we could look at 2 or 3 or 4 of these that perhaps would be at the bottom of the list that we could take off. Because we know we're not going to get down to, we're not going to tell staff that we want them to work on 10 items. So if we, for one, I'm going to throw out that I think one of the issues, knowing what's on the plate of the Building Appeals Board, I think the 2013 Building Code update can be taken off that, which we are going to prioritize.
I agree.
Okay.
It's item 11 on 1-4, right?
Yes.
And I think we should go ahead and call up, we have 2 speaker cards regarding goals. Let's go ahead and hear what they have to say before we finish up our discussions.
Okay.
Bill Miley?
Bill Miley. Well, one I already spoke about, which was to establish an administrative procedure to do chronological charting on all projects and make that chronology available to the public. So I talked about that. And that probably would be almost number 1 for me. And I think it could be done relatively easily. Mr. Mullane receives the application. He tells his technician to type it in on the spot on the website, under planning department, and it says, application received from AT&T for cell tower on the Lutheran Church property. And I think a lot of people would like that. Okay. I don't see any real problem with doing that.
I don't think it's posted. Oh, yeah.
I guess this is a goal, and the goal is to work hard to keep planning projects in the planning department. And I use as an illustration tomorrow night's presentation on the Gables subdivision proposal was done by a contract planner who I don't know. I know nothing about. I have no idea as to whether they're credible or incredible or uncredible or non-credible. But I don't understand, and in reviewing it, I have a lot of questions about it because I don't think it's very good. But I would hope that our goal would be to keep all projects in the planning department. We have a planning staff that are very professional, and if there's too much work, maybe the council should cut off some of the goals. But I don't like what happened. Okay. I was going to talk about transparency and trust, but that's not appropriate. Another goal, which is part of keeping the public informed, is for the website that's called Muni Code something. Did I get that right? Okay. I spent a couple hours on it today, and I was looking at telecommunication ordinance, and there's nothing there. I don't think we have 3 minutes, right? I thought this was a workshop.
3 minutes.
I have lots of things to say.
Okay, just hang in there, Bill. Let's have a discussion here.
Okay, great.
Madam Mayor, I suggest, because it's a workshop, that if someone has a number of topics to talk about, that they be given a reasonable period of time to discuss it. I, for one, want to hear
Thank you.
more from Mr. Miley.
And I agree.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
There was nothing next on the right-hand side of the telecommunication ordinance. It was blank. And there were several of them like that. I couldn't find view shed. I put it into the search index. I couldn't find that. And there was a little note that came up, and it said, the city has not provided any information. So I think a goal would be to make sure that that municipal code site was kept up to date and complete. Okay, thank you. And I do have one more I can find here. Oh, by the way, this is a great opportunity. Thank you for scheduling it and doing it. Oh, I have two more. We have a on the city website under City Council. There's a little circle that comes up and it says City of Ojai values, which is really nice. And I made a copy of it. And I underlined.
We have it, Bill.
Yeah, I know
Back of our
that.
packet.
I know that. The point is that I underlined a bunch of phrases in here that I would like to see the city council schedule a workshop to discuss. The values that are listed here and how they are carried out. Because if you ask my opinion, I can point out some things where these policies have fallen down and have not been carried out. So I would request that a goal be created to have a workshop on the city values stated on the webpage, and look at the processes and the administrative procedures that are used to make them work. The first, and I'll give you an example of one. It says, under transparency and open communications, you state, we will conduct our business in public so that our citizens can easily understand our processes and policies. And I would refer to people back here that I don't think that's occurred in that particular tower situation. And I think we all need to sharpen it up and make it better and cooperate more, and a workshop would be really good. Okay, last item. This may be a year to look at bigger questions of life, like I do as I have gotten into my 80s. Like we talk about having air pollution control goals for 2020, and I'm saying, oh shucks. I mean, anyway, okay. So, I want to ask the council, in the form of a goal, to place on an upcoming agenda for public discussion this issue. And I'll have to introduce it a little bit. One form of city government is the form that we have, which is rotating city mayors. We have a city council and we have a city manager, 3 parts. A second form that cities use is an elected mayor for 4 years, a city council, and a city manager. And a third form is an elected 4-year mayor with administrative powers.
Bill, I'm going to interrupt you because that was discussed earlier in the evening, and it's going to be scheduled for council discussion March the 11th.
And the subject is?
The elected mayor.
Oh, well, good. Can I just, yeah, okay,
Sure.
That's great. Wow, that's the first time that I've ever spoken and it's already happened. That's really good.
That's all the speaker cards I have. No, it isn't, sorry. Michael Shanahan.
I don't think he's here. I think, did Michael leave?
Okay, that's all the speaker cards I have if Mr. Shanahan is not here.
Okay.
It's kind of difficult to re-gear.
I can help with that.
Okay.
May I go ahead?
Councilmember Clapp.
Okay. Back to tasks. One of the tasks on the potential goals, page 1-4, transient rentals of residential units. That has been a discussion item many times over the last 5 years.
Many.
And because we have been so loaded with so many other items through the years, it continues to get pushed forward. And I would like to see that be brought fairly close to the top of tasks in the near future, because I think that there's some really good ways we could handle it, and I think it needs to be finally put to bed, so to speak.
I would second that. I want that to move up in priorities.
I would third that. We've been dragging it along long enough.
It's time.
Madam Mayor, I do have a question for staff, if I may interrupt. You mentioned earlier in the meeting that it might take 6 to 12 months to work on some of the ordinance. About how many, though, do you think staff could handle between those 6 to 12 months, like item-wise, just to start thinking about which task? Because some of these are really good. I just want to get kind of a picture of what you recommend, Mr. Clark.
So I think in the best of all worlds, if you had us working on 3 ordinances at a time, that would be manageable. We've been in a situation where we've done more, but it tends to stretch the process out, and I'm not sure it's more efficient, because you do 3, and then when those are done, you can move on to the next 3. So part of the trick is to decide which ones are most important to do first, and that's kind of our goal tonight.
Sorry, kid.
Yeah. I was just going to mention, Madam Mayor, that as far as the transient rentals are concerned, I think that that's an issue that is really important, but it's also extremely important to the Visitors Bureau, and it's also important, I'm sure, to our real estate community. And I would like to see some sort of I typically do not like to have committees for the sake of taking time to look into something, but this is an important enough issue that I think that we ought to try to get some sort of a meeting put together with the Visitors Bureau and maybe the Board of Realty to kind of discuss where we want to go with this. And I'd like to, if we're talking about it, because it looks like it's one of those that we're interested in moving forward, I'd like to have any input from the public on this one item as to what they think, if anything, should happen to this particular item. What's the best way for us to move forward to identify and to regulate these transient rentals? Does anybody have any input for us?
Before we check with the audience on that, I agree that we should be holding communications with other agencies or interested parties. But before we do that, before we reach out there, I would like it to be put on an agenda to update us as a full council on where we are. Because after so long a time, I forget what we've done.
Yeah. Right.
It doesn't have to be that long, no.
And Madam Mayor, it's probably a good idea if we're going to put it on the agenda for the council. I was presumptuous enough to think that we are interested in doing something about those units. I think the agenda item would indicate, does the council really want to do anything right now about transient rentals? And if the answer to that is yes, then how do we go about doing it?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
And I have.
And I think that, in the form of a discussion item on a regular agenda, would bring people from the public to discuss it.
Yes, and it would also, I would prefer, rather than breaking ourselves up into subcommittees to study these individual questions, I really prefer it be done right here.
I agree. And also, I'm tired of things getting stuck in committee. And they just get stuck. We've had complete streets in the committee for 5 years.
It's out and about now, though.
Yeah, but things have a tendency, there's a reason there's that term, stuck in committee. And I think that this thing has been stuck long enough that we don't need to get it stuck further in a committee.
Okay.
So maybe we will have to have more special meetings. Because if we get our agenda too packed, then we simply can't get through it. Mm-hmm. And so maybe after we go through these preferences on the goals, maybe we should then set, I don't know, pick 5 or the top 5 and then hold special meetings on those particular topics.
Right.
So that we can have more complete council input and input from the public.
Yeah. May I just clarify for the public or people watching this on TV? Because if I heard the phrase transient rentals, of residential units, I was the general public listening at home, I'm not sure I would understand what that meant. What it means is that you go to a vacation rentals by owner or something, and basically you, let's say, live on North Signal Street, and you're at 108 and your neighbor at 110 has an ad that they're renting rooms in their private residential home by the night. In other words, they're acting like a hotel. We have, basically, we have ordinance against doing that. They may or may not be charging them occupancy tax or whatever, but that's what it means, basically, where people are renting rooms in their house for a period of less than 30 days. That's what it means.
Or their homes. It's not just rooms.
Rooms
It's
in
not
their
necessarily
homes.
just rooms, it's also entire homes.
Yes, they may be
BBRO,
renting
you
the
can rent
whole
an entire home.
They may rent the entire home
Right,
for a
it's
weekend
not just
too.
rooms.
Right, but they are basically acting like a hotel, and when they are zoned in a residential zone. So that's the issue, and it's a big issue.
Councilmember Laura?
No, I absolutely agree. I think that it should be put on a priority. But I have comments on other items, but I don't know if we want public's comments on that, like Councilmember Blatz asked for.
You want to see if there's anyone from the public that would like to address the...
Yeah, and I also think that if we have a special meeting with two or three agenda items, and it's publicized, then the public that's particularly interested in that, because I, for one, have gotten a lot of public input on these transient rentals from neighbors that don't like it because it's increased traffic, and there's people coming in and out of the neighborhood, and who knows where they are. But those people aren't here tonight because they didn't know we were going to specifically be talking about that. So I would like to say that that's an important issue, and I'd like to see it on an agenda for us to further talk about.
And since we seem to be picking our favorites, something, and I agree on the second unit and the transient rentals, but I think something we need to put at the top of the list is number 6, the telecommunication facilities ordinance, because I think to protect ourselves, we need to get something in place ASAP.
I would agree.
No, I'm not going to ask if there's anyone in the public.
I think that should be the number one thing that we look at right now.
Number 1 and transient occupancy rentals, number 2. Height limit and second dwelling units are already in process.
I don't necessarily think that with regard to the telecommunication facilities ordinance, I'm not sure that we need to have a special meeting on that. I'd like to see that on our regular agenda. We've heard a great deal of input from the public with regard to this AT&T application. And I just as soon just put it on a regular agenda so that we can direct staff to work on it rather than at a special meeting. But if anybody feels differently,
Okay.
I could be persuaded.
That's probably a good idea, because I'd like to make a distinction between the cell tower application, and an ordinance, a telecommunications ordinance. A discussion on a telecommunication ordinance isn't about the cell tower that's currently being discussed. And so I want us to have a discussion. If we hold a special meeting, would that draw a huge crowd that would like to talk about the AT&T cell tower, which would take away from the telecommunications ordinance?
Madam Mayor, if I could ask Mr. Fletcher, by having public input and making public comments with regard to our thoughts about the telecommunication ordinance, are we in any way jeopardizing our impartiality in the event that application were to come to us?
No, I don't think so. I mean, depending on the statements you were to make. my only input would be probably, since we're on such a very short time period with the CUP application, that this would be scheduled for sometime after May, so that the CUP application is processed and the decision is made and finalized. And our goal is basically, is to have that done before the end of May, all the way to council if necessary. And so if you just schedule it after that, then I think you're fine. But even if you want to do it beforehand, Jess, we would have to just be, a little more careful about categorical statements we make. But I don't see that as a huge issue for you.
And I'd like to just convey, even if we were able to get an ordinance in, I see you, Bill, even if we were able to get an ordinance in place in 2 months, remember that it would not be retroactive. It would be from the point of its approval forward. Bill Miley.
Are you taking comments on the transit occupancy? I can't hear you.
They want to hear you at home, Bill.
Yeah, I guess. Bill Miley, on the issue of the transient occupancy tax for vacation rentals, it would be, I know there's a history involved in this, and I heard from somebody that your council a year ago told the planning department not to enforce it. That may not be true, because it's probably not true. I have an example that should really set you back. On my little computer, I had typed in Apple. I was looking for the Apple Store, and I didn't put .com or Apple Store there, and I got an Apple rental in Ojai. It says the Apple House, and it's in the Arbolada, and had a nice picture, and it was available for $850 a night. Now, 10% of that is $85, so that should come to us. And I don't see why. I don't see where there's any logic or any reasoning that would exist that wouldn't prevent us to actually putting this in force right now, so that you have to have a license, you have to get neighbors' permission, maybe, and you also have to keep track of who you have and how much they paid, and you have to report it. And if not, you're going to go someplace that's bad. So I would think that for the purpose of generating revenue and controlling the businesses that are operating without business licenses when everybody else is, that we would take Scott Eichler's offer up and do it quickly. Thank you.
And this is another time when so much time has elapsed, at least for me, that I don't remember where we are on it. We have, you're going to update me?
I remember.
Okay, good.
We did put a moratorium on enforcement because we thought we were going to get to it right away. Remember that? I think it was you and I were the only two on council, and we thought it was going to be imminent, and it was such an explosive issue at the time that and there were so many people coming forward with the yay and nays about it that we decided, all right, we're going to just put it on hold, and we're going to get this done. And then, like so many things do in life, we got other things going, and it just kind of drifted on. So yes, Bill, there is a moratorium on enforcement. All the more reason to get this done now.
Okay, and which goes back to my earlier request. Regardless of what, top 5 issues we come up with, I would like and someone else said a chronology. I would like to know what we've done, where we are, what's left to do. Mm-hmm. So that I'm clear on at what point we begin work again. Because I don't want to start from the beginning. No. On some of these, we've had them before us for years.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Member Laura?
I have a question for staff, just for clarity. We've named already a few, and again, I want to be sensitive to our staff and staff time, make sure we just don't say, oh, but we could do this, oh, but we could do that. I've heard already that about the height limit is coming to us soon. The water-wise landscape is coming to us. We're working on the second unit right now. We just possibly want to start the transit rentals for residential units. So just to get a perspective, is there more opportunity to add more to the list right now, or should we start thinking that these are going to be our priority? And then my other question, I know that's one question. My second question is, because I want to also know who's really going to be the staff in charge, and if there's potential to work some other of these items we have on here that potentially could go to other staff, like maybe social media or vision statement or a roadmap to sustainability. Is there potential for flexibility in that way? I don't know if that you could answer that right now. I just want a sense to see where we're at, and we're not just giving a bunch to staff, and we're just asking for more than what we could handle, and be on the same cycle of putting stuff up later on in the year. So, am I making myself clear? Yeah.
I can give you a short answer, and they're getting shorter as the evening goes on. And that is, we determine the order.
Yeah, I get that.
Of these goals.
Yeah.
And then our city manager puts it together with staff. That we're not involved in that. We
Okay,
just determine the
I
order.
just wanted to see, I want to get a kind of a timeline of where this all fits, and maybe I'm asking too much of a question right now.
Yeah, so in my mind, the goal tonight was just to find out what your highest priorities are for the next 6 to 12 months. Then my pledge is to come back to you with a work plan to say how that would be accomplished.
Okay.
So I'll have to sit down with my staff, and we'll have to talk about.
So I should erase that from the back of my
No,
mind and feel
keep it-
free to.
Keep it in the back of your mind.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm sensitive to that, and I'm just not saying, but with that said, I guess I understand where we stand. I also think that it's going to be, I think it's important to do neighborhood planning and possibly the mixed use overlay for commercial. I don't think it should be right up there, just like these other items were, but I should think it should come somewhere in the middle. And I do have a question. I heard that there was somebody already applying for a potential mixed-use overlay for commercial. I don't want them to think that we're going to talk about it right away. I just want some clarity on that.
Well, yes, there is an application coming forward for a concept review before the Planning Commission. And it's on the east end of Ojai. I don't know exactly the location, but
Is it vacant or?
it's a vacant parcel, and the proposal's to put commercial on the front and residential in the back. And really, at this point, the applicant wants to hear from the Planning Commission as to whether they're open to that or not, because he feels it's the highest and best use of his property. So he can go forward with a concept review without us deciding that this is a high priority.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
You done? Yeah, my understanding, he can go ahead with that application outside of this, and this to me looks like the mixed-use overlay could be, fit in with the neighborhood planning. 5, 10 and 5, I think, kind of fit together. Because within the neighborhood planning is where you would determine where a mixed overlay, commercial and residential would be. So those are kind of, do you see what I'm saying there, Rob?
Yes.
And I was looking, streetlights, it sounds like a low priority, but in some ways it's a fairly high priority because it's running at a deficit. So we're bleeding money from that particular district. So that I would like to see addressed fairly early on in order to try to get them more efficient so we stop hemorrhaging money. And Mr. Grant Man back there, the magic Grant Man, you know, I don't know whether, would you mind stepping up to the podium? I know we've had this discussion before, but are there any sorts of grants available for updating street lighting to your low wattage amber night sky lights that would be more efficient? I know we've had this discussion, and it's more complicated than it seems.
I think it's important to keep in mind that we don't own the streetlights in the city of Ojai. They're owned by Southern California Edison.
That's right.
So we are working with them right now to try to get a couple of strategies for reducing the cost of those streetlights. They haven't been highly responsive. They keep on putting us off. But at this point, they've committed to early March to having some analysis done that we asked for about if we shut off certain streetlights permanently and have other lights shut off at night, at midnight till dawn, to have a take a look at those different strategies to see how much money we would save.
Well, that's good. That's a start.
We're moving
All
on it.
right.
Mhm. Okay.
The behemoth is being budged to March. Good. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, there's certain things on this list that we are already in the process of working on, and which may be able to be completed with less effort than others. We are right embraced in the middle of the second unit policies. That's got to be one of the priorities to continue. The Building Appeals Board has spent a lot of time working on that. There was a meeting with the Planning Commission. So I would think that this is one that is already in place. It's already moving forward. It's already on our priority list. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we are working on it now. The
Right.
question to you is, do you want to keep working on that, or
Right.
do you want to work on something else? If you
Okay.
want to keep working on that,
No, we
then
need to finish it.
But I mean, we're so far along in that, to stop now would be, in my opinion, foolish.
yeah.
The other is, we've already done a dark sky ordinance. What, if we don't do public education on it, the public isn't going to be aware of all the ramifications of the ordinance, but the ordinance is done. We've already voted on it.
So what we need to do on that is we need to consult with the commercial and retail community about what safety and security lighting needs are, and develop guidelines that fit those. And we have some draft guidelines that we already developed. So there's a bit of work there, actually.
Okay. The height limit for solar, that's not overly burdensome, is it?
Well, so we need to fine tune the ordinance. The ordinance is drafted and has been reviewed a couple times, and there's a couple changes that were discussed by Planning Commission, which are just wording changes. And if it's adopted, then we have to develop guidelines. And we have the Santa Barbara guidelines as a model, but my experience is it's still going to take several cycles of review to get that to fit Ojai, because they have their unique characteristics and we do. So I think there's a bit of work there too.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, what happens if, right now, if somebody has solar panels and somebody next door, we don't have this height limit, do they just build a house and block the solar panels?
Yep.
Is that
Well,
what we do?
I would say a two-story building requires design review.
Yeah.
So the planning, I mean, if the neighbor came up and said, this is really offensive because it blocks my solar panels, I think the Planning Commission has the ability to use design review to deal with that. But if nobody comes forward, or there is nobody next door and someone builds a two-story house, it may be different.
Okay. How about the leaf blower policy? Can we bring that forward for nothing else than to say we're not going to, that we can have a public discussion item saying that, are we going to enforce it or not enforce it, and decide what we want to do?
We do have that on the agenda for the 25th.
It's already on,
Okay,
yeah.
so we can take that off of here.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not take it off, because I think the discussion is about making an exemption for the new gas-powered.
The question before the council is, do you want to either not enforce the existing ordinance or enforce the existing ordinance differently until such time as we revise it? And there's a variety of options from being stricter to being more lenient.
But that's coming before us already.
Next meeting,
Okay.
next
Right.
week.
And true, the new gas blowers may be better, but we haven't, they're not on the market yet, we don't know.
When's the height limit's coming to us when?
So
Because it just went before planning.
what I have to do is I have to locate some solar contractors and make some wording changes and then schedule a public hearing before the planning commission.
April?
And it just depends how much other stuff's on our plate. But yeah,
Gotcha.
that's probably reasonable ballpark.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I have another comment because in regards to height limit and second unit policies, I keep thinking about neighborhood planning because I think that different zones require different requirements and guidelines. So is there any way of incorporating just some of that philosophy? I know the forestation plan is out there. I mean, I don't know how to tackle it. It seems like it would be beneficial for us to kind of look at that, not necessarily work on the whole plan, but make sure that when we do talk about the height limit and the second unit policy, we do incorporate some of that. And I don't know if that's going to be too much.
Well,
or
I think okay, here's where we are with neighborhood planning. We've made an application for a grant. And if we get the grant, we'll have a lot of money and we'll be able to do some fairly comprehensive neighborhood planning over a long period of time. And I think easily that could incorporate building envelopes, which relates to the height limit as well.
When do you learn?
May.
May, okay.
So if we don't get it, we'll have the money that we put in the budget, which I believe was $30,000. And that'll allow us to do a very narrow scope. For example, we may just focus on the streets and the front yards rather than the building envelope. So it's a little bit hard to say until we know what our funding is in May.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Clapp?
One of the things, too, I was talking about how the scope of city government has broadened through the years, Severo, and this is an example. Number 3, water-wise landscaping, that's actually coming down from the state. So that's kind of one of those things that gets thrown in our laps with no funding to do.
I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mandated
Oh, yeah.
2010, so
Exactly.
so
that's one of the things that ends up taking our staff time.
Yeah.
May not necessarily be a priority of the council, but ends up taking our staff's time, which ends up pushing our priorities, like the TOT issue with the vacation rentals, farther forward. But it is important, clearly, because we don't have any water. Well, it seems to me that telecommunications would be number 1, transient rentals number 2, and neighborhood planning number 3 is my guess at this point. And it looks like leaf blower, street sweeping could be sort of cut and brought together because they're sort of similar in a way. Leaf blowers are about dust being blown in the air and all of that stuff, as well as the noise, and the street sweeping is about air pollution as well. So those two could be maybe companions on an agenda. I'm trying to see ways we could put them together to make it more efficient when we address them. And again, as I said, the streetlights, number 12, because it's a deficit issue, but Greg said he's at least getting some information back from PG in March. So where does that leave us after that?
And that just to piggy off that, it's again, my question is, I would like to see like a timeline where all this fits so we could be more practical about it. That was the original question that I was asking the staff, see where everything fit to see if we could kind of wiggle something here and there. And that's where I was getting at, that type of question.
Yeah.
So I think, I think that I could, even based on what I've heard so far, put together a rough schedule that says, between now and June, we'll be working on these, and then once those are finished, we'll be working on others, and bring it back to you for further review.
And I mean, I would like that. And also, I think it's really important if we can start thinking about our vision and goal session, seeing where we could fit that, and then also possibly doing some type of, I don't know if we could get some staff recommendation on how we could, build a connection with our citizens a little bit more. I know it's a balance because I fully think that we can't hold their hands, but I think that maybe what we're obligated by law isn't enough to communicate with our citizens, and maybe we could use some of the social media. It's something else that we could be creative, something that could be a lot less affordable. But I think it's apparent that we need to discuss it, and we need to be truthful what our capacity is, because I think that it's not our intention to withhold things. Sometimes it's a lack of just communication, and that I think that could be easily solved.
Yes, separate from the goal discussion, I think there were some good suggestions tonight about the need to know earlier what's on our plate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we could probably just bring that back as a separate discussion.
Madam Mayor, I particularly like the suggestion that Bill Miley made about having the applications online for people to look at. I think that that's really important.
So they don't have to go to the city.
Yeah, and online and updated on a regular basis so that anybody can go online and see what applications are in the are in the hopper, where they are they getting ready to go before the Planning Commission? Are they being reviewed for a director's exemption? I just think that makes a lot of sense, because even if we have a project that is going to go before the Planning Commission, typically the only people that get notice are those within 300 feet.
Right.
And so anyone else would have no idea that that's even being proposed. And just because they're not within 300 feet doesn't mean that they might not have some good input that we should be, that either we should be aware of or the Planning Commission should be aware of. So I think it would really behoove us to put the process of the building applications. If there's one thing that I am absolutely convinced of, the one part of our city, and particularly the internal workings of our city, that has the most contact with our citizens is community development. And all of the difficulties that we have come from interaction with the community development department. And that's why it's so important that the community development department is responsive to the questions of our citizens, that we give them as much information as we possibly can, because this is the one that affects everybody particularly from a zoning standpoint, and what happens in their neighborhood, and what the city's going to look like, and what we're approving and what's not being approved, and all that. So I think the more we can put information out there for anybody to get a hold of from easily when it has to do with community development, I think is going to go a long way for people feeling like they at least know what's happening and don't feel like they're getting blindsided by a project.
And I have a comment, and then I'll go to you. If I were to go to the city website, Mr. Clark, would I be able to find on our city website the list of code enforcement issues?
I don't think that's on there. Steve, do you?
And the reason I'm asking
we have that list though, so it seems like something that.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is we need to do some work on our website.
I have a comment about that.
Right after I finish?
Yes.
Okay. Forgot where I was going with that one. Okay.
Update our website.
We need to make our website a little more user-friendly. One reason I myself do not go to it all that often is I get frustrated with it pretty quickly, because I'm looking for something specific, and I really don't want to look through every screen trying to find it. So what I'm getting at is it should be possible to put a a link to our code, or whatever you would call it since it's internal, to our code enforcement activities list, and we could create a similar chart for applications that have been submitted to the community development.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
We can, yeah. And I'm not sure if Bill wanted to talk before Councilmember Clapp, or...
I'll forget, Bill.
Go.
Okay. Maybe we need to put update website on there. Updating a website is not an easy thing to do.
I understand.
It's a huge task, and it should be something that it really does need to be brought into the 21st century. It's really antiquated. So I think it is a reasonable goal, but I don't think it's something that we could accomplish in this cycle at all.
Well, when we go to
let me say this.
Huh.
That's a budget question.
It is a budget question. Yeah, it's pricey.
There's some very good off-the-shelf municipal website applications that you can buy. I don't think we have the capacity in-house to design one.
No, absolutely not. And if they've got them already made, that's great.
One other thing that I'll just mention that I don't know whether it's available on our website or not, but what interests me as a council person, and what I would think would interest people in the public to be able to go to the website and look at, is number one, the list that we get that's every council meeting that shows the code enforcement, as Madam Mayor said, every code enforcement issue in the city that we're investigating. The other one is the Planning Commission gets a list of all the director's exemptions that have been done since the last Planning Commission, I believe, meeting. Well, that's something I would think the public would want to see, what we are approving as an exemption that's not going to go before the Planning Commission, as well as those approved permits that were approved, even though they may not have to go before the Planning Commission, like a single-family dwelling. I think that should be on there. And then the last one, I think, is just the building applications that, as Bill suggested. I think those three, and I can't imagine that's too difficult to just to have a page that has that on there, but I'm not a website designer. But I really think that
something that we have to consider is we have a staff that is already at limit as far as the amount of work it can do.
Mm-hmm.
And we have asked more and more with fewer and fewer questions, with fewer and fewer people.
Then that's another question we should ask.
Right.
Is it time to hire somebody? Is it time to hire another staff member?
And I think it would be critical
about being overworked and whether it's time to add somebody.
That's a budget question, too.
It is a budget question. It should be asked for the upcoming budget cycle.
Yeah.
Right? And I wasn't finished with my last thing I wanted to say. As far as updating the website, yeah, it's a budget question, and it is a huge undertaking. And when you start adding stuff like that to a website, if you don't have a website set up for that kind of stuff, then you're scrolling through a mess. So you just layer stuff, and then it becomes really awful. And that becomes user unfriendly in its own way, too. So I think we have to be kind of aware of overloading without it's like putting too much dirt in a truck, more rocks than a truck can handle than the axle can handle. I think you can do that with a website, you know what I mean? You can just really make a mess out of it. But then I want to go back to something Severo said earlier about the rodenticide thing, and I'd like to have somebody remind me whether that's on a future agenda or not.
Yes.
It's right in that book.
It's right in this one. Excellent. Good. Okay.
I'd like to go back to the website. And although it's maybe a budget question, we may want to pull it outside of waiting for the budget, because I think if we can improve our website so that people can get more complete, accurate information, we would go a long way toward, quote, transparency and trust. So an improved city website, I think, could foster those things. So I'd like to see us.
Madam Mayor.
And Councilmember Laura, then I'll come back to you.
I definitely agree with you. It's something that we could work on. And I love this. conversation, because even though I'm not a techie, or even though I'm not a Facebook I do have a Facebook, but I rarely use it. I see a lot of potential in it, and I see a lot of potential in working with our commissions that have put on websites. I was fairly impressed by how the Art Commission has worked with other agencies and brought information to our city website, and it's creative. We have the ability and the talent in our volunteers already, so I think that we could potentially, that could be a collaborative effort if we really just hook up with other. We don't necessarily have to invent the wheel. We just have to improve it and be open to other options. So that's all I'm saying, because I would hate, again, I know Parks and Recreation has a Facebook. I know HPC just did a Facebook that has nothing to do with the city, and the Art Commission has developed their own art website. So it's the whole connecting part that I'm excited about, and that could potentially reach out to the public, because I hate to say it, but sometimes these topics are for very left-minded people, and we need to reach all the public. So that's my comments.
And another quick comment, and then I'll see who else would like to speak. And I believe it was Bill who brought it up. Oh, hi, Bill. I believe it was Bill that brought it up as far as going to our Muni Code. Now, I'm old school, so I go pull the book off the shelf. But I have the same difficulty. I mean, you have to keep checking the index until you find what you're looking for.
Horrible index.
So what I'm suggesting is, or what I would hope we would do, is let's check with our provider, and we should have a search engine that could accommodate. If I type in cell towers, it should be able to take, so what is the problem with the search engine?
The search engine works pretty well, but in the case of cell tower facilities, it really doesn't. It takes you to an old code that was repealed, and the new code is in a completely different section. So there are some quirks.
Okay, so we
can talk to the vendor. I'm not sure what they can do.
We need to start talking with our service provider, because until we let them know there's a problem, they're not going to do anything. So we need to let them know. Bill Miley?
You're kidding.
When Councilmember Laura talked about having better communication with public, etc., it keyed off a little historical remembrance. About 10 years ago, our city had a quarterly newsletter. I mean, they've been around for what, 200 years or something like that? But my thought would be, we have a budget of close to what, $10 million? Over that. It would seem to me that we should be able to spend $40,000 or $50,000 in having somebody who is dedicated to public information, who regularly produces maybe a website or newspaper or whatever, a story about what's happening in the city, and what are we doing and what aren't we doing, and what problems do we have, and comments from the public, and a thread that maybe goes through Councilman Laura's thoughts relative to this. So the issue would be $11 million budget, let's put some money into routine public information and make it better. I'd like to give you a compliment about the city's website. Once those circles, or I'll call them bullets, the circles showed up, it really helps navigate through the website. So I go to the city council, I click on that, I get the current agenda, I look at the agenda, and then there are all these details, which I find really interesting, including a report on code enforcement, which I really think is neat to look at. I like that. And I get an email for those people who don't have their email into the city. Give them your email and they'll send you and notice that the agenda's coming up for the Planning Commission or the City Council and maybe other commissions too. And then if you want to know more, you go to the city's link and you click on that and it brings up all the details. And I find that really nice, really helpful, and it's a good base to do more on. So, thank you.
Okay, where are we?
Madam Mayor, if I may interject. So I guess what I'm hearing from the council is I do like the order that Councilmember Clapp gave at the beginning. And I think that it'd be good for us to get more of staff input on how that looks, and then come back and revisit maybe our tasks and priorities and see if we do want to tweak something. And something that would help me personally, I don't know if it'll help the rest of the council members, is also identify at least what department that would fall into, just to get an idea, if I may, just to get a better perspective if I'm being practical or not. And I mean, that's all I got. I mean, I think that we've done a good job.
That would be a wonderful direction. And so we would come back, not at the next meeting, but in March, with a more precise, sequenced, proposed list of how we do these. And you'd still be able to say, well, you really need to move this one up, and that one's not so important, so you can move it back.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Clark, what is our budget?
So our general fund's about 8 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more like 7.5 million. Mm-hmm. In fact, that's in that report too.
Exactly. It's not 11, Bill. Darn, wish it was.
Where did you come up with 10 or 11?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. It depends on how you look at it. There's a whole series of funds, but many of those funds are restricted in what you can use. The general fund you can use for anything, and it's 7.5. Part of the reason it's 7.5, though, is that we're bleeding off $500,000 into the capital improvement fund. Mm-hmm. So sometimes
Decision to do so.
Absolutely, that's been your highest priority, and I think rightly so.
Any other comments from council?
Other than, thank you all for your input.
Oh, wait, we don't want to send them home yet. I had intended to do this at the last meeting, and it got a little hectic. I want to adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of two of our longtime residents who've passed away. Wendy Helgers conveyed some information at the last meeting about Tony Sanchez. He is a longtime resident here. He's passionate about gardening. He loved helping everybody. He was just very valuable to the community. So I would like to recognize Tony Sanchez, and I'd also like to recognize longtime Ojai City resident Winnie Hirsch. Mm-hmm. She passed away January the 28th at the age of 96. Mm-hmm. She was preceded in death by her husband, Monroe Hirsch, who was a former mayor of the city of Ojai.
And the town optometrist.
Winnie was an author, teacher, sculptor, civic leader. She was active in the formation of the Citizens to Preserve the Ojai, and she began a movement to clean up behind the arcade, which culminated in the Arcade Plaza redevelopment project. So we've lost a valuable guardian and an asset for our city. So when we finish, I'd like to adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of Winnie Hirsch and Tony Sanchez. Now,
I have nothing further, Madam Mayor.
I do.
We have someone in the audience that wants to speak. So come on up, Michelle.
Just a quick question.
Okay. I don't know that we're into answering questions, but come on up.
I just want to know where the city manager.
Come up to the podium so they can hear you at home.
We can't hear you. We're
Hi, it's me again. Mr. City Manager, I'm Michelle Thomas. Where did you find the cell tower ordinance on the city website? Because I couldn't find it either. Tell me how you got there.
Could you get with me tomorrow and I'll give you the specific section? I think it's
Okay.
in development guidelines.
Okay.
But just to be sure, in fact, I've got your email because we've exchanged emails before. Let
Yes.
me look it up and give you the specific number, and then you can pass that around to others.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's a
Put it on the
great
website.
idea.
Exactly.
Put it on the website. Thank you.
And maybe have a few copies at the desk that if people come in to City Hall, that Danae could give them, or Sherry.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I don't have really any announcements, but I do like to just say something about Tony Sanchez. We personally know him. He's known me since I was born, basically. And he did do a lot for particularly my family. Him and my dad got along fairly well. They call each other compadres. So it's he did a lot of good stuff for this community, and it just he lived a great life, and I really do respect him as a person, and I'm glad you recognized him. So.
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two things. Good, very good news. The Friends of the Ojai Library have hired a architect to build the extension. The extension on the library is going to go up on private property that is behind the Ojai Friends of the Library little bookstore. For those of you who go way back, that's the Van Dyke property. And it was bought by citizen donations, probably about 7 years ago, for quite a lot of money, actually. I think it was $900,000. But the reason it was bought was because the land behind it came with it. So the Friends have now raised about, I think the budget's around $400,000. They've hired a local architect, Mr. Foster, and hopefully a plan for the extension will be coming to Planning Commission in the near future. I mean, we don't have to deal with the county because we have tried before to put a meeting room on the county part of the library. And I can't even tell you about what a nightmare that became. I think some of you were involved in it. But this extension was going to be on private property. So it's another ballgame. So this is really something very much to look forward to. Also, looking forward in terms of the cell phone crisis that we are dealing with, what I see coming out of this that could be for really the citizens' good is that some people who are coming only for the cell tower will suddenly become interested in what goes on in city government, will suddenly start showing up at city council meetings which really have nothing to do with the cell tower. I mean, that's what happened to me. I became a citizen activist, and the next thing I know, here I am. But I'd love to see new faces at city council meetings. So I'm sure with the number of people we have who are vitally interested in this topic, some of them will stay on and just become more engaged in the city council process. That's it.
And if you need tips on how to do that, Bill Miley will help you. Councilmember Blatz.
I have nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Clapp. City Manager Clark.
I've said enough for one night.
City Attorney Fletcher. Madam City Clerk. And we have department heads out in the audience. Mr. Grant.
Nothing here.
Ms. Mears.
Of course, nothing.
Nothing? You didn't even let me call your name yet. Should we have her come up and introduce herself so that the public will know who our new community director is?
Poor thing. Okay, so
Well, good evening. Hi, I'm Kathleen Wold, and so I'm the Community Development Director, and so I listened intently to all that was said today, and we'll take that back and I think incorporate your comments and suggestions into what we can do, Rob and I working together to make things on a pathway to being more transparent and accessible to the public. I think I hear that loud and clear.
I'd like you to know that generally our relationship with the public is very collaborative. I think the anger over this one particular issue has boiled over and people are frustrated, and that will lead to more transparency. But generally, we have a very collaborative attitude, and very few people in the audience do not think that we are withholding information or whatever. So I'm sorry you've come aboard thinking that the public
No,
and
it's
I are
fine.
not on the same boat, because normally we very much are, and welcome.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? No new business? Oh, I apologize, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, I have done.
Meeting adjourned.
Once you are